Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wharton Tech Talks. I'm your host, Manasi, and today we're joined by Nicholas Stevens, who's a vice president of product focused on artificial intelligence at Zillow. As part of his role, Nicholas leads Zillow's strategy to incorporate cutting-edge AI into its product suite, including across customer service, improved search, media, and loan officer efficiency, amongst other things. Prior to joining Zillow in 2016, Nicholas was a product manager at Prismatic as well as Twitter, and originally began his career in corporate strategy at Juniper Networks. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Wharton School and a master's in computer science from Stanford. Nicholas, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So to start, would love to hear a little bit about your entry into the product management space. And it would be helpful to understand what your transition from the initial stint in corporate strategy onto the
Yes.
product side looked like.
Yes. A lot of it started at Penn, and Penn is what enabled some experimentation. So I did a dual degree undergrad, which meant 5 years at Penn, both in Wharton and on the engineering side. And along the way, got to try not only cool courses, but a whole bunch of different internships. I volunteered in microfinance, did corporate strategy, also did engineering roles. And through that evolution, found that something that mixed all those things would be the most exciting. I also got really into machine learning, sometimes called big data at the time, through a senior design project. And after graduating from Penn, went on to more school and for the first time tried product management in real life at Twitter and found that that was exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up.
That's great. And I'm curious, on the product management side, it's definitely evolved, especially as the tech ecosystem has matured and
Yes.
different segments of tech have emerged as well. When you joined, what were some of the skills and areas of development that you felt really helped you differentiate yourself, both in getting those opportunities and succeeding in your first PM roles?
Yes. A lot of I counsel earlier PMs is being really clear on where you're deep and then what skill sets you have broadly speaking. So many different PMs have different deep focus areas. Some are very technical, some come from a more design or customer facing background, some come from sales. And being really clear on where that skill set is and how you're growing it is most important. For me, I came from a richer engineering background and got very into learning the intricacies of linear algebra, machine learning, and big data. That was my thing. And then on the second axis of like, okay, cool, it's great that you're a functional expert, but a lot of product management is how do you interface with different groups, often without the same skill sets and backgrounds you have, getting good at truly communication in large groups, alignment, really thinking about rich mindsets. How do you approach unique problems that might have many multiple answers, but you need to work through together? Those skill sets were true way back in the day when I started and continue to be very true today.
Very helpful. And then switching gears into your trajectory at Zillow, you started on Zillow's
Yes,
artificial intelligence team as a senior product manager in mid 2016.
yes,
Could you share a little bit about how you came across the opportunity and kind of what your excitement about joining was at the time?
yes. I originally interviewed just for interview practice. I thought I might go into virtual reality and augmented reality, but then knew that Zillow was such a leader in the space and thought, hey, might as well go get to know some great people there. Early on, it was all about personalization. So being really smart in search and recommending homes, often for buyers and renters. And that's where I really got deep. And then over time, that expanded pretty significantly. We now do investments with other customer facing things, including our 3D home experience, now called Showcase. And then more recently, we're spending a bunch of time, what we call lower in the funnel, working directly with real estate agents and loan officers to make them even more amazing and productive as they help customers. Along the way, it was a great career evolution. I got to learn about different parts of the business beyond just the AI applications. I spent a couple years in the middle leading what we call shopping and connections, how people connect with agents. That involved AI, but was much more in the business and operations and customer facing aspects. And so getting that multifaceted journey really helped me grow and learn.
I think there was an article by The Guardian that called 2016 the year AI came of age.
Mm,
Would love to hear a bit about kind of the state of AI development, but
Yes.
also acceptance and understanding on the part of large customer enterprises and also the mid-sized clients that today might use AI, but at the time might have been a little bit unsure about how it fit into their business use cases.
Yes. My perspective is that usually advents in AI technologies usually go in waves. So initially, there's something very cool that people like playing around with, but don't really know how it works or where to apply it. Then there's a promise that, hey, this is the final answer. It's going to be great. It's going to be life changing, but it's still not really hitting 100%. I'd call that kind of the teenage phase. And then after is the final phase of true adoption. I'm using it in my day to day work. It's making my life better. I'm not slowing myself down to take advantage of it. And I haven't read the 2016 article, but I bet that was talking about deep learning, where at the time we were like, wow, these models can look at art and understand it. They can start self driving cars and all this stuff. But in 2016, we were probably still a teenage phase of, hey, there's opportunities here. And yet it truly hasn't changed all of our lives. I'd say we're at the same teenage phase with generative AI. A lot of us have used ChatGPT or equivalent. It is very cool. It's good at things that AI has traditionally not been good at. But I think many of us are still trying to figure out how to use it day to day in a productive way. There's still more exploration, more startups, more big companies kind of exploring what's next when it comes to these latest and greatest technologies.
Got it. Got it. And I really liked what you said about comparing it to the current phase of Gen AI, and kind of will be interesting to see how that maturity and adoption curve changes over the next 2 to 3 years.
Totally.
So going back to Zillow, I think one of
Yeah.
the major product updates or releases at that time was updates to the Zestimate. And from
Hmm.
my understanding, that
Hmm.
was a core part of Zillow's original value proposition and
Yes.
differentiation in the market of real estate marketplaces. Would love to learn a bit about what were some of the goals with updates and
Yes.
steps to make it more accurate, more utilized by both consumers, and something that homeowners and real
Hmm.
estate agents were bought into.
Yes. So the Zestimate originated way back in 2006 with the origins of Zillow, and AI has been baked into Zillow from the beginning. In 2016 and 2018, the major changes were starting to use new types of data, often in unstructured data. So if you think about a listings page for a home, there's a lot of structured data like beds, baths, location, HOA fees. But if you're a human, you are thinking about all those images, maybe the 3D tour, what it's like when the sun comes up and you're dropping your kids off at school. The old models were never taking advantage of all of that unstructured, rich information. And so for many years, we've been looking at techniques that can get the unstructured information back into the Zestimate. The most recent thing we said publicly was using neural networks, similar to deep learning that we were talking about earlier, as the heart and soul of this estimate. And what's awesome about networks is they can more natively blend structured and unstructured information. Last but not least, I'll say the goal of this estimate has always been the most accurate and useful valuation as possible. We say often it's a starting point. We want it to be this neutral number that agents, that loan officers, that customers, both buyers and sellers, are looking at as a guide and then taking it from there when they're making their offers and hopefully moving.
Really interesting. And you mentioned the data sources. And in general, something we've been hearing in the industry across use cases of AI is partially reliant on the strength of the data sets. And then, of course, its
Yes.
ability to filter through tabular structured data and unstructured sources, as you mentioned. How
Yeah.
has availability of data sets in general evolved? I guess
Mm.
part of that is, of course, data relevant to Zillow, and part of it is as you think of new applications of AI for real estate. How do you view just the data ecosystem available to you?
100% that data is the most important part, usually in any machine learning equation. If you don't have solid, understood data, particularly debiased, then it will be a very hard road. A lot of Zillow's journey over the last 20 years has been to get and clean up and make available that data, particularly when it comes to housing. So that's not only listings that are appearing on the site or rentals listings, it's going to public record, basically local counties, and getting very important information that customers can access today, but usually very hard to access, and making sure that's available on the site in our models. Going forward with things like generative AI, the challenge is that when people test things like ChatGPT, they're usually testing on public data sets that are more akin to general internet usage, like a message board, a question and answer forum, but not unique to real estate, which is very deep and often very complex. What we spend a lot of time on is, what does good look like for an agent? What does good look like for someone who's trying to make an offer on a home, and making sure our models are living up to those standards in a very, very unique way.
Absolutely. And I think another really valuable offering Zillow has is the recommendations engine. Of course, having good personalized tailored recommendations is, I think, been a core part of a lot of tech-driven marketplaces, and with
Yes.
Zillow in particular, a source of differentiation. So
Yes.
could you share a bit about the goal of the product? And part of that is, I assume recommendations, of course, are really good for home buyers and potential renters, but in
Yes.
some ways, it's maybe also a good telling signal to realtors and maybe even
Mm-hmm.
homeowners to understand what are potential buyers going to see. Curious about the goal. And then also, what were some of the parameters you were indexing on to make it a superior offering?
Yes. The big advantage we have when it comes to recommending homes for buyers and renters is our scale of customers. Basically, if you think about real estate, it's very differentiated by market, sometimes down to the zip code or even the local street, which is unique in real estate compared to movie watching or TV show watching, where, hey, I can use people's patterns in Boston to recommend a good TV show in San Francisco. I can't do that in real estate. It doesn't cross. Leveraging that scale to be effective and go, hey, you are similar to these users in your market, or these unique attributes that only people in the Bay Area seem to care about, seem to be important to you, and this new listing definitely lines up with it, is our name of the game. And then, yes, the other part of your question is, in that journey, there are some significant signals useful, particularly for future home sellers. Should I list my home now with a great agent? How should I market that home? Like, what would be appealing to buyers in my region? We put a lot of that together under our Showing Time Plus brand, and we call that product Showcase. And us giving those signals to the seller's agent and the sellers has been particularly useful for them to sell quickly and efficiently.
Absolutely. And appreciate the note on signals. How do you measure kind of the success of the recommendations tool, right? Or asked
Yeah.
differently, what are some of the KPIs your
Yes.
team or another team might be tracking to say, not only is this accurate, but consumers on both sides of the marketplace are leveraging it and converting
Yes.
as a result of our recommendations?
Yes. So accuracy is key. We have a lot of trust for buyers and renters and sellers in the Zillow brand, and we don't want to make any mistake in terms of data quality. So anything that goes out the door has to have a very high accuracy bar. In general, what we look at is a blend of engagement, conversion, and retention metrics. So if you think about the classic recommendations algorithm, the first signal you get back is, did people engage? Did people spend a lot of time looking at that home, which is usually a good sign. But that can be taken to a fault. If you are just looking at engagement, you're going to start sending both traditional homes that this buyer should probably buy, as well as fancy mansions and Bill Gates's house that would also be fun to look at. And all of that is appropriate, but in moderation. And so we often look at retention. Was that useful to get your job done? Did you go on a tour of that home? Did you take notes that were positive that you want to potentially move on that home? And then, of course, conversion. Over a longer time horizon, are the things that we're sending and showing you actually useful for your main job of finding a new home for your family? And we want to make sure we can tell that story appropriately. It does take roughly 3 months on average. And so we look at cohorts whenever we do new models. But that blend of all three buckets is super important to success.
Got it. Got it. And stepping back a bit, I think we spoke a little bit about it at the beginning about how
Yes.
generative AI is now in the teenage phase. I did want to understand a bit about how multimodal AI has
Yeah.
impacted the real estate industry broadly, and specifically, how might that impact agents,
Mm,
consumers on the rental and home purchase side, and then, of
yes.
course, sellers of their properties?
Totally. So I'll bucket it into both customers, so buyers, renters, sellers, and then agents and loan officers. On the buyers, renters, sellers, the multimodal wave is super useful for them because how you discover homes and understand if they're right for you is multimodal already. You are looking at structured information, you're also looking at the images, you're flying through in house panoramas. And before this generative AI wave, it was very hard for us to natively put that all together in a seamless experience. One of the things we're doing now is the homes that we recommend or show you in search ranking are starting to use those signals from what you liked about the kitchen or what you saw in the big backyard at the tour. This is 2024, customers kind of expect this, but it's just a lot more easy with the latest and greatest AI. And then the second bucket, moving over to agents and loan officers, they already actually have a lot of deep workflow. They're often in a CRM or equivalent tooling. They're trying to both nurture new leads as well as convert them well and really provide this personalized service. How LLMs and generative AI show up is often behind the scenes, basically making some of those tasks 10 times easier to do or automatic so that they can spend more time with their clients face to face.
Great, great. And I think Zillow released its Chat GPT plugin last year. So would love
Yeah.
to learn a bit about the goal of that tool. It sounds like in some ways it's to accelerate the workflows and the efficiencies, maybe on the customer service side. I also assume, of course, keeping privacy concerns involved as well, but there is some helpful data you can understand in regards to the kinds of questions consumers are asking, what kinds of properties they tend to ask about, and if it matches the recommended options Zillow is providing. Are those typically some of the main benefits? And how do you see that tool evolving, especially as these LLMs mature by their own standards?
Yes. We did release a plugin with ChatGPT last summer, but then took it down. And more of our efforts, including with OpenAI, are more directly in our own customer app as well as in the tooling. We acquired a CRM called Follow Up Boss. It's the most popular real estate CRM. So we're doing a lot in there. And then, of course, with our financing tooling. What we've found is to make this AI super smart, you have to augment it with unique real estate data. We talked about how do you understand what a good conversation is very unique in real estate, as well as what data these models need. Basically, often about homes and neighborhoods is also very unique. And so we're spending a lot of efforts there. And I think long term, you should see a lot more multimodal experiences that bridge between what the customer is doing, trying to figure out her next home, and what agents and LOs are doing to support that. We think AI tooling and services can be that glue to make all three that much more efficient as they work together.
And on that note, there's been a lot of talk about AI on kind of the video and image side. And
Yes,
a natural
yes,
application I can think of is, can you actually make the video touring process much more streamlined, higher
yes.
quality, and then actually help a potential renter or buyer see different layouts, different staging, and make the home buying process much more pleasurable for them? Is that kind of an adjacent area Zillow thinks about? And do you feel like the current state of video based generative AI is ready to support that?
Great question. Really investing in these 3D immersive experiences has been a huge investment for us for the last 3 or 4 years. And one of the things we just released on the day that the Apple Vision Pro was released is what we call our Immerse app, where you can actually put on the VR goggles and basically walk through a home in a much more immersive way. We're very excited to keep going in this space. Some of the stuff that you mentioned is important to us. So as you tour, be it in the app or on the Apple Vision Pro or in person, a good agent is often pointing out things of interest. Hey, Sub-Zero fridge over there, marble countertops, and oh wow, look at the view over here. Us being smart to learn about what matters about that home, but also what matters to that customer is a big area of investment because that means the next tour can be that much more personalized and the next recommendation can be that much more personalized. And then the other part is when you get down into the offer, figuring out what to offer for a home if you're buying, what contingencies is often a very personal question. It's based on what else is out there, but also how important is this home to you, given all your attributes. And so us being super knowledgeable can help set up that agent and customer to have a great conversation on, okay, should we offer a bit more to really land this home, or should we wait and maybe go for a different one down the road?
And we haven't spent as much time on kind of the use cases for maybe a loan officer or someone who's
Yes.
actually helping the transaction happen. I know a couple years ago, there was this surge in AI driven underwriting tools, right, to help decide whether a mortgage should be delivered, or at least helping understand here's the propensity to pay and pay on
Hmm.
time that this home purchasing candidate has. Where do you see kind of the next stage of use cases for that group in particular? And where does Zillow see the biggest opportunity?
Yes. You listed a couple. I'd say the biggest is truly confidently understanding what I can afford and then getting guidance against that. So we just released some new model and customer experience improvements. We call it buyability. We believe every home should have a kind of buyability. How likelihood am I to be able to afford this home? What do I need to do in order to afford it? And that's very customized to me. There's a lot of unique information about the home, but there's also my own personal information about debt and income that I need to provide in order for me to understand if I can afford it. We've put it under that umbrella, and already customers are taking a lot of advantage on getting their own kind of personal number. And then the second is guidance. If you're a first time home buyer, the mortgage industry is tremendously complicated. This is not taught in schools. There's a lot of jargon, and human loan officers help a ton in guidance. And we think our digital experiences can also answer all those questions that you might think are embarrassing, but everyone has, and you need rich answers to in order to be well equipped to make that offer.
Great. Do you kind of see that application as evolving through partnerships? And I guess this
Hmm.
is a broader question, which is I assume there's sometimes a buy, build, partner question as it relates
Yeah.
to AI at Zillow. In general, how do you think about that? Naturally, given all of the applications Zillow has built, there's a real strength in the internal building approach. But for something like this, where there are all these external factors, regulatory considerations, and plugs you might need, how do you view that?
Yeah. The buy, build, partner equation is super important when you're running a team, an AI team at any company, and particularly at Zillow. Particularly because in these waves, something that might have necessarily been proprietary before, there was nothing out there like this, could be commodity a couple years down the road. And so we try to be really on top of when we should keep investing purely in house versus leveraging open source or third party tooling. A good example of this is back in 2006, we had built our own proprietary search stack in C because there was no rich ecosystem performant search stacks out there. Now there, of course, is, and we want to spend more of our unique AI science time on what happens on top, all the unique models, proprietary to real estate. And we obviously switched out to a more open source backend so that we could spend more time modeling on top. And you'll see that progression happening almost in real time as things like Gen AI mature as we go forward.
Sure. Okay. Really helpful to dig into the applications and,
Yes.
and how you think about strategy. I did want to touch a bit on, at a high level, of course, the product management process and then also kind of growth of the AI industry in real estate specifically. So,
Hmm.
my first question on that was I assume there might be some of these smaller real estate AI startups that emerge over the next couple of years. And a lot of them will potentially be great partners for Zillow or maybe even add-on M&A candidates down the line. But how does Zillow think about building those kinds of partnerships and maybe supporting the growth of some of those real estate startups? And this is kind of a two-part question because
Yeah.
first, Zillow naturally has a lot of valuable data that's proprietary, but that has been curated that could one day maybe be a great partnership opportunity for these startups as they look to build up their own models. And
Right.
second, Zillow naturally has a lot of the existing business infrastructure and contracts, brand recognition to really further that. So, how do you think
Yes.
about maybe supporting these adjacent startups in the long term?
Yeah. Great question. Two real examples, one from last week. But first is we do give public data sets in our open source territories, particularly for academia or other companies to play against. And so examples there include a lot of our public housing information. If you are a research arm or a potential startup trying to improve housing affordability or situations, you get access to that and you could build on top of it. We also released an indoor floor plan data set. A lot of our rich media captures produce a floor plan, which is super useful for both buyers and renters. And we want to see great things happen on top. of that unique data. And so that's also open source. And then last but not least, particularly with generative AI, these language-based experiences are super exciting and super cool, but in housing, you have to be very careful about fair housing violations. There are certain questions that LLMs should just not answer to be above board. We spent a bunch of time internally on what we call the fair housing classifier, basically teaching any LLM what's okay and what is not okay. And last week, we partnered with a couple governmental institutions to release that publicly as open source. And already people are contributing against that and using that both in academia as well as real startups.
Very cool. Very cool. And can definitely see
Yeah.
the value both on the government side and academia. In order to support these growing AI initiatives, I wanted to learn a bit about the data or tech infrastructure changes that have to
Mhm.
occur at a company like Zillow, kind of at the simplest level, just to support the throughput and the model evolution, but also changing the testing process. Maybe there are changes to the way products are deployed and actually put into the ecosystem. So, what did
Yes.
that look like, especially over the past 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. If we were scientists at Zillow today, we would probably bucket our work into two different spheres. One we call offline experimentation. Maybe we have an idea. Maybe we have an existing model that we want to improve. Maybe, to your example, we have new data sources that we want to play around with. And we need rich tooling, data access, et cetera, to kind of go through that loop repetitively without a bunch of meetings or a bunch of requests. We've built a combination of third-party tooling and our own in-house tooling to make that cycle that much more easy. And then the next bucket is, okay, cool, we're onto something here. We made a good tweak. We have a new model. We want to test this in real life and then, of course, scale it to hundreds of millions of people pretty quickly. So that's more about latency and throughput and cost, et cetera, and then also reliability. We don't want it to go down on Saturday. And that we've partnered a lot with cloud providers as well as bridged some of that journey with our own in-house tooling so that when you get to okay, we should ship this or test this mode, you don't have to re-implement the whole thing and start from scratch. That's been a long journey. Doing that right is not an easy game, and most companies have these kind of internal AI platforms to do it. And we're constantly looking at what good third-party tools are coming into the ecosystem and when we should go, hey, let's just adopt that instead of our own in-house version of it.
Got it. Very helpful. And this is actually a good segue into some advice oriented questions I wanted to
Yeah.
cover for our listeners.
Yes.
And the first is just as the industry evolves and you see more and more use cases, more and more different types of customers engaging in AI purchase decisions, what
Yes.
skills, either technical or otherwise, do you think will be the most important for those who
Yes.
want to build a career in AI? And I assume they're a bit different for someone who's on the engineering side or someone who's doing go to market or strategy, but any tips you might have to share?
Yes. So I think there's definitely the functional expertise if you want to be a scientist, knowing a lot about linear algebra or the latest techniques if you're an engineer, same with tooling or marketing or comms person. But I think what bridges all of that is really a deep understanding of the customer. Like, what job is he trying to do today? What does success look like for that job today and tomorrow? How is that evolving? And then, as a product manager, where can we have the right short term bets to try and hit that out of the park now versus we need more time long term to explore maybe earlier stage ideas, earlier stage models that won't help tomorrow, but someday, if this really works, will be great. And the science, the tech is all fascinating, but what really enables that is a clear understanding of success for a customer job. You don't get far if you're just trying with an AI hammer looking for nails. You need to know exactly what you're trying to solve from the beginning.
Absolutely. And on that note, do you think there are any unique roles or career specializations that might emerge given some of the unique challenges and growth objectives that AI brings?
Yes. I think there is at least twofold. One is what we call ethical AI. So we have a mix of functions, but product management, science, engineering, comms, government relations on, okay, what is success? What is do no harm? How do we think about not just the old like bias in, bias out from data, but how do we show up and improve the lives of others through these models, not just keep it status quo? We have some unique skill sets, some unique functions there. And then the other is we need a better name, but probably conversational designer, conversational data scientist. Understanding if a conversation was productive is very complicated. There's immediate, like, was that initial answer a good or bad, a biased or not answer? But also, did that help further my understanding of my original question? Am I farther along to getting what I need to get done? And actually testing and measuring that qualitative and quantitative is very complicated, even more psychology than it is math sometimes. And we have some unique specialists really going deeper in that area as well.
And for that second role, would that be ideally suited to someone with a technical degree?
Yeah, sometimes, yes, particularly when it comes to like more quantitative measures and exploring the permutations that a large language model can go in. But I would say almost as much that an interaction design background or even behavioral science, behavioral econ of how do people think attitudinally about if this is useful or not? How do we think about an answer not just being factually correct, but really making sense to me and my background and where I'm coming from? I'd say we work just as much with non-technical people in that space than we do technical.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost at the end. We, per Wharton Tech Talks tradition, like to end with a
Yes.
couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So we'll get started. To start, you're based in Seattle. Would love to
Yeah.
hear about your favorite activity out there.
Oh, wow. With a 5 and 3-year-old, definitely exploring new parks, often in the rain. There's a lot of cool outdoors here, and so we're often outside with a rain jacket.
Great. And then currently, if you were to look at your coffee table or maybe your Kindle, what are some of the top magazines or books you're interested in?
Yes. Saul Khan just came out with a new one about educational AI. I think AI has a tremendous opportunity to really deliver on some tech promises in the education space, particularly secondary education. And so I'm fascinated with some of the new things coming from there. And I'm a chapter into that book.
Awesome. We'll have to add that to the list. And
Yes.
then lastly, given you are a Wharton grad, I was curious if you have a specific Wharton memory, event, class that still stands out to you as a key part of your experience.
Yes. I'll say two, if that's allowed. One is meeting my now wife in Management 101. I learned a lot of things from that class, but we were in rival consulting teams, and it was great to get to know her through that. And then I think the class that I use the most is negotiations. I took it with Richard Schell, and the book I most recommend to this day is Bargaining for Advantage, Negotiation Strategies for Reasonable People. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not using some of the quick tools that are in that book as well as the long-term lessons. It's incredibly useful.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. This has
Yes.
been a really insightful conversation. And I know I learned an incredible amount in this half an hour. So thank you
Yes.
again.
Thank you again. It was a lot of fun.